You're sleeping in the kids' playground.
What?
Can you move?
No. Wait.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. Joe Resinello. It's like I don't even know where to start. Okay. Welcome back, everyone, to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello. And we're going to just jump right in tonight. We have John Horvat joining us. Okay. Because we want to talk about the March for Life. We think it's a very important topic to talk about. We want to talk about the level of hatred. Joe Resinello is really where I want to start. John, our producer, let's bring in John Horvat right off the bat at the front line with Joe and Joe, because we're gonna jump right in tonight. John, thanks again for joining us here at the front line. I want to throw something out real quick. Quick bio for all those who listen to the front line with Joe and Joe. Many of you out there already know John Horvat. Those of you who listen to us have seen John with us on the show. Most importantly, in his bio, we recommend his book, Return to Order. If you want to know how we got here, I mean, the title of the book tells you all you need to know, because we are a completely disordered society. And that intro that our producer just showed, I mean, John Horvat, let me ask you a question. Welcome back, brother, by the way. Thank you for coming on to the show.
Thanks a lot, John.
Yeah, great to be on. Always great to be on. No problem.
John, let me ask you a question. I'm a movie guy, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see John Huston's The Bible? Do you remember that long, epic movie? The Bible came out in like the 1950s, the 1960s. You ever see that?
No, I never did. I never did see that particular one.
Well, let me put it like this here, and then we'll jump into our conversation. Right. In the scene in the movie where Sodom and Gomorrah is about to get trounced by God, okay? You see these people, and they want, we know from Scripture, they want the angels to come out, okay, because they want to have relations with them and all that. And we say to ourselves when watching the movie, well, people couldn't have been that crazy, could they? And then we watch the clip of our introduction tonight at the front line with Joe and Joe, with women in Poland barking at TFP guys who are praying the rosary. And you say to yourself, well, yeah, actually people can be that insane. And the woman, guy, whatever it is, walking in Miami, that's where we've gotten to. It's not only insanity, but it's also the level of anger and hatred coming from the other side. And that's why we wanted to have you on, because you've asked a question recently in one of your articles, which is, where is all the hatred and anger coming from? With that, I'm going to throw it over to Joe Resinello, and we'll get the conversation started.
Okay.
Now, we're going to be talking about the March for Life, particularly around why do so many people hate the March for Life. We just spoke with the folks out in San Francisco. Their march is the 21st. We talked to the two organizers. It's not as big as the Washington March, which is going to happen this week as well on January 20th, which is Friday. I guess a good place to start is, doesn't the recent Supreme Court victory make the March for Life superfluous? Break it down for us.
No, definitely not. I mean, it's still, as everyone knows, it's not. It hasn't finished with abortion in the United States. The march is only irrelevant when there is no more abortion. That's the bottom line. And if we become complacent and say, well, no, we could slack off now that Roe v. Wade is over, we're doomed to fail. We're doomed to fail. So I think we need to keep on marching, and that's the key word, marching, because I think that's what they hate so much about the March for Life. Not so much the life part, but the march part, because marching is something of the church militant. It's something energetic. It's something that really gets that energizes, and that's what I think why they hate it so much.
John, let me ask you this. John Horvat is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. John, you know history, okay? That's why we love having you on, okay? So let's talk about the word march for a second. The long march through the institutions, okay? The women's march, the march for civil rights. which is no problem with us, but that was obviously co-opted by the left, okay, and made a leftist political cause, okay? They love to use the word march. But when we use it, when we march to protect or to call for legislation that protects the lives of innocent human beings from being deliberately murdered in the womb, they, like that clip, like the one I'm talking about from the movie, they blow a gasket. The women in Poland start barking at you because you're actually marching, I would say, for a real cause. Talk about that. Talk about the word itself and how the left uses it in abundance.
Yeah, definitely the left uses it all the time because it is a highly symbolic word. It means people coming together in sync toward a specific goal. So I mean, it really gives that idea of unity, of purpose, of meaning, and there's a certain nobility that's attached to the word march because you're doing something that's beyond just my own interest. I'm doing it for a cause. In our case, it's a noble cause. In their case, it's an ignoble cause. But nonetheless, it does push the person beyond himself and says, "Well, I'm doing something beyond my own self-interest. I'm doing it for some perceived good." In their case.
Well, that's the thing too. I mean, if you are an individual getting involved in a march, you have to disappear, kind of like your ego has to go on the side because you're involved in something bigger. But like you said, they could talk about all the marches they want, but theirs are, as you said, John Horvat joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe, ignoble. What are you marching for? You're marching for so-called abortion rights, or as I mentioned about, like, if you want to take it more of like a 20th century view, the long march through the institutions. You think that's a noble thing. Well, when we use it and say, well, we're marching your butts out of the institutions, well, guess what? We get to use it too. Joe Resinello, where do you want to go?
Well, John, over the years, I've gone to the march. I can't go every year because I have very young children. I took my daughter when she was 1 year old to it. It's clearly a unifying movement. Like, I think it is the event that unifies the whole movement. Talk about that. And why does the left fear it? And I know they fear it because they don't televise it. They're afraid. 500,000 people show up. It's massive.
Yeah, they consistently underreport it and never give the statistics or never give the right statistics. They're always reporting. Whenever they show it, they'll show a very focused scene of the pro-lifers, giving an idea that there are not that many people there, and they will always show the protesters, which are very hard to find. They always manage to find the protesters at the Life March. But yes, it is an energizing event. And it only tends to grow. I mean, I've been attending the events since the late 70s. I've seen it grow. Back then it was 30,000. Now we're seeing hundreds of thousands. You're seeing a lot of people who are young people, full of young people, very vibrant, very energetic. I don't think the other side has anything that can compete with that. And I think the thing that really gets them scared is it's very religious. It's a very religious fight. And very Catholic as well. In the beginning, it was very hard to find Catholics. There were it was majority Protestant, and you'd rarely see a bishop, or you see some priests, but barely see a bishop. Now it is overwhelmingly Catholic, and there are a lot of bishops there, and they're following their flocks to the right with the March for Life. So it's definitely has changed, and I think that religious aspect is especially it makes the left hate it and fear it.
John, let me ask you this, okay? We've all been. I mentioned movies earlier on. When we were younger, all of us, you, Joe, and I, okay, we saw, or at least we knew about movies like Rebel Without a Cause and movies like that, always highlighting, well, it's the youth that's going to rebel against their austere and authoritarian parents. John, I'd love for you to comment on my view on this. I think the most austere and authoritarian parents are leftist parents. They will not accept any of their children thinking anything like we're talking about, especially on abortion. Okay. And I think the thing they fear more than anything is that, you know what, their generation has come and gone. Maybe they had 2 generations. Okay.
Mhm.
The younger people, and the reason why I think both you guys mentioned it, that the media doesn't want to cover the March for Life is because you see these young people there, and many of them are girls.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they're not
Yes.
11-year-olds either.
Right.
They're 17, 18, 19-year-old girls saying, I am the pro-life generation.
Yes.
Joy Reid and the rest of her horrid crew at MSNBC and the rest of them cannot have that.
Mhm.
That is not what they want out there. John, please comment on that.
Definitely, there is that youth element, that female element. The very people who are supposedly benefit from abortion, they are the ones who are against it, and that enrages them. It's very much. We do a lot of campaigning against abortion, and one of the big things, when they see us, they say you're all men, and nothing enrages them more than some lady coming up or young lady coming up and say I'm with them. I mean, it just really they can't take that. But it is true. I mean, and I think it is a very hopeful sign, because the United States is the center of the pro-life movement worldwide. Everybody follows our template. We made the template of pro-life, and for that reason, you have pro-life marches not only in the United States but in Italy and France and in Ireland and in Europe. You find them all over the place. But we are.
John, we can't hear you, John. John, we can't hear you. John, I think we lost your volume. We can't hear you.
Okay, now you'll hear me.
Yeah, we got you.
Now we got you. Now we got you. We got you right back, John.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened.
No worries.
No, you were talking about Europe.
happened.
I want you to hammer home on that.
Yes,
Talk about
so we are
France
the
and Italy
template.
and Ireland.
Yeah, we are the template that everybody follows, because we are the ones that started the pro-life march. We, the original plan was to let abortion pass and then just sort of let it fade away. There was supposed to be a limited resistance, and then finally everybody'd accept it, but that didn't happen. And because we resisted, the United States resisted, the whole world resists, and we have that glory. I think that it is something impressive.
The unfortunate part, I think, is that America, as it goes, we are also the template for the opposite way.
Right. Yeah.
We are right there with North Korea. As far as, if anybody out there who thinks that abortion, John, 210 members of the United States House of Representatives just said if a baby's born as a result of a quote unquote botched abortion, the doctor is not required to give that child care. John, I'm sorry. Please don't. Anybody who's in favor of that in America, please don't talk to me about Holocaust. Don't talk to me about brutal dictators. Don't talk to me about injustice. Don't talk to me about slavery. If you can't even get that through your head, now that the baby is quote unquote not part of the woman's body, you still say that baby is not deserving of medical care? So my larger point, John, I love a quick comment on this, is we also set the template on the other side.
Definitely. We're polarized, and that polarization is not going away. And I think it is a matter of, who lasts the longest, because that is where we're at. The other side doesn't have the dynamism it had before, but it's still there, and they still are leading the way. The media is still there. The establishment is still there, but the fact that we're still here and so vibrant, despite not having the resources the other side has, I think that's something very important to realize. And I think it indicates that God is on our side, because there's no other way of explaining it. We would not be able to do what we do without that protection of God, and that without the help of God.
John, I will say, I'm going to hand it over to Joe. I will say this. We are up against a juggernaut. And you mentioned the media. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. It's very difficult for us to get our voices out there. However, as you just said, nothing is impossible for God. He'll take a little show like Joe and Joe, and he'll throw it out there along with 1,000 other shows. And then all of a sudden, guess what? We have a voice. Why? Because of us? No, because of God. Okay. God is the one who'll get the message out there. I think that what we need to do, and I'm going to hand it over to Joe, we just have to continue to do what you're doing, what TFP's doing, to do what we're doing. The fight's nowhere near over.
No,
The fact that, remember Churchill after the Battle of Britain? They were like, well, is it the end? He goes, no, it's not the end. It's the end of the beginning.
Yes.
That's where Roe versus Wade is.
That's
it's
it,
the
yeah.
end of the beginning. Joe Rossinello.
John, talk about the future of the march, but also talk about what you guys do, TFP. I know a lot of people probably know who are listening to us, but I'll be honest with you. I think you guys nail it. You inspired me. I do a rosary rally. It was our 2-year anniversary, actually, this month. We use your banners, all men, all over Bergen County, New Jersey. You mix activism with prayer. And I think that you have the right formula. Talk about, again, the future, but also tell everyone what you guys do, because I'm going to be honest with you. I really believe you have that formula. We need both.
Well, absolutely. I think the future of the March for Life is, I pray that it will continue as it has. I'm going to be there on Friday. I think the prospects look good. All the buses around our area are full. There are no buses available. So at least in our area, there are a lot of people going. I think people have gotten into the habit of going. It's not going to be an easy habit to take away, but we do need to continue the fight. We always need to emphasize that part, that this is a fight. It's not and it is a fight against evil, and that's what we're up against. It's and that is our emphasis. I mean, our emphasis, the TFP's emphasis, is to say that we are engaged in a fight of good against evil, God against the devil. We have to arm ourselves peacefully and legally accordingly. And a very important part of that is the Fatima message, the rosary, the spiritual life. That is what levels the playing field. Otherwise, it's not possible. So when we do go out, we do a lot of activities. We do studies, we do educational work, but we also do street activism, where we get out on the street and protest against the horrible things that are out there. And this kind of action energizes, it inspires, and I think it puts fear in the other side, because they're not expecting this type of action. And we have dedicated ourselves to doing these types of things because we need to be out there. We need to be there in the public square. We can't just simply not do anything in the face of all this. And I think it has proven to be very effective.
Well, the tide, perhaps it's not where we want it to be, but the tide is turning against this culture of death. John Paul II called it. Again, God has been patient for centuries. We know that from Scripture. Just because we live in this time doesn't mean that this fight is going to end while the three of us are still on this earth. Okay, it's a continual fight. I'm glad you mentioned, John, between good and evil. I think the most encouraging thing I've seen, TFP guys, young guys, like teenage guys, high school kids, okay? They're not only fighting for life and getting out there in the streets, they also were down at the Sacred Heart Cathedral in Newark, New Jersey. I met them. I saw Michael Hitchborn up there at Seton Hall. I'm a Seton Hall grad, talking about some of the things going on there and doing all sorts of things. I think ultimately we have to remember what we do is important. Jesus is going to judge us, okay, and say, what did you do? And I think that's the most encouraging thing coming out of what TFP is doing. Everything else is they're just constantly getting out there, and they don't care, and they're speaking boldly for the truth.
Well, I would like to note that these young people that are out there, and they like to be out there. They enjoy to be out there. They enjoy the debates. If you don't have a debate during the campaign, they actually get sort of say, well, what's happening? We want to get into the fight, and so it's not something we're forcing people to do. They actually like to do it, and we provide the opportunity, and we find that doesn't only apply to young people, but to older people as well. a lot of people, once they get out on the street and they're protesting, so many people have said, thank you for that opportunity. Thank you for letting us do this. And it's amazing because they do feel that energy.
John, tell everybody where they could find you guys, support you guys, and get your book.
Okay, they can. You can go to the website www.tfp.org. That's where you have. It's a website that has articles and information about TFP and its publications. You can get the book Return to Order at returntoorder.org, and you'll see it right on the front page where you can order the book and read Return to Order.
John, I'm going to say this. A friend of mine who we both know, our friend Pedro from New Jersey, he lives in Pennsylvania. Now, he turned me on to your book. And I want to tell every man out there who might say, I don't have time to read a book. Okay. Pedro gave me the DVD version that I popped into my car. Okay. And I listened. I wish I had time to read more, John. I just don't. But I got to tell you one thing, though. I listened to Return to Order. If you want to know out there listening to us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe about the disorder we're in, you really ought to go out and buy John's book on audio or hard copy version, whatever you want to do, a hardback version, because it will enlighten you as to what's going on. John Horvat, you are always so welcome on this show because you bring a breath of fresh air. Joe and I are a couple of hot-headed Italians from New Jersey, okay? And we could easily get angry. And you know what? Righteous anger is a good thing, okay?
Right. Yes.
You are a level-headed voice in this spiritual battle that we're fighting. John, final word for our audience, please.
Wow, you put me on the spot. Well, let's keep up with the fight. Those who are there or listening, if you're at the March for Life, stop by our stand with the band and everything and say hello. I'll be there.
Absolutely. John Horvat, we love you, brother. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Coming on.
All right. Great. Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. Joe, so important, Joe. So important. Now, we didn't have enough time, but I wanted to get into it a little bit about overturning Roe versus Wade and where we're at now, because that's why I mentioned Churchill after the Battle of Britain. I don't know if you remember that, Joe. He turned around. He said, I don't know if it's the beginning of the end, but he said, I think it's the end of the beginning. Okay. Joe, the beginning has been going on for 50 years since that atrocious decision by the Supreme Court. Okay. The overturning of that is only the end of the beginning. It's not the beginning of the end. And it's certainly not the end. Because we find ourselves in a position, Joe, listen, most states, and you and I have said this before, and I want your comments, most states are going to keep abortion legal. That's the bottom line. Nobody's banning abortion. And that is where I think we really have to fear. What do you think, Joe?
Well, I agree with you. Listen, we have to change hearts and minds. It's gone to the states. A lot of legislation didn't go our way in the midterms. We have to change hearts and minds. And to be honest with you, with organizations like TFP, with the amount of people that are going, the visibility with the young people, I think the future looks bright. And remember, God is on our side, as John said, and the truth always wins.
Well, and ultimately, Joe, those within a generation never realize they might be in a generation that's transitional. We might not be able to make, let's say, achieve any sort of victory, okay, on a macro level. But what we do is still important, as you said, because it has to do with what we are supposed to do, because God wants us to do it. Now, one of the things that we're supposed to do is, we mentioned with John Horvat about young kids, teenage kids, okay, that are at the March for Life and everything else. Obviously, that has to do with education. Now, in order for you to impose this communist leftist worldview on the world, you have to get to the education establishment. That's what you have to do. And if anybody thinks that we're not going through that in America, well, guess what? You got your freaking head in the sand if you can't see what they're doing. Let's play a clip. Joe, I really want you to go in deep on this, okay? Let's play a clip from Joe. Here's the thing. Whistleblowers, the left in America, They love whistleblowers. They love them at the FBI. They love them in Trump's White House. We all love whistleblowers, except when the whistleblowers point out their evil and their hypocrisy. Let's play a whistleblower from the Soviet Union about education, and then we'll come back.
мероприятие in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black. You still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible.
Now, you know who knew this, Joe Resinello, and we have experience in our lifetimes, okay, where we don't have to go back and read a book from, talk about an historical event that happened 300 years ago. If you look at Poland in the 1980s, okay, I would just add to what Yuri was saying in that, is to say the infiltration has also taken place in the church. However, people know when they're oppressed. People know when, like in Orwell's 1984, when you have a boot stomping on your face. People know that. What do? They try to get to the next generation through education, okay? Or what they would call, he called it psychological warfare. All sorts of ways they try to infiltrate the culture, okay, to make people basically powerless. I can't think of a better example of what he's saying than modern America. America in the last, Joe, I'm not even going to go 20 years or 30 years. I'm going to say since the end of Obama's second term, we've gone off the rails. I didn't even think it was that bad under Obama, even though I thought it was bad, okay? We've gone off the rails, and I think that's what he's talking about. Joe, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, it's happening all over the world. My wife brings that up to me all the time. Believe it or not, we're not even as far off the cliff as, say, Canada, Australia, or Europe. Believe it or not. Why do I bring that point up? That means it's demonic. It's not isolated. It's demonic. Honest to goodness. That's number one. Number two, what he's saying is prophetic. That clip goes back to the 80s. It absolutely has come true. Look at the people who have been affected, which he was talking about at these institutions. The rich. You're talking about very good universities, Brandeis. You're talking about Vassar. You're talking about Ivy League schools. You're talking about Williams College. You're talking about some very good Catholic schools. I'm not going to get into it, but some of them too. These kids are privileged kids. Why do they get affected? Because to be honest with you, these ideas just sound good on paper. They've never worked, these kids. When I mean worked, when I was in the summer, when I went to college, I unloaded trucks, I
Oh yeah.
landscaped, I worked construction. People who come to this country and basically sons of immigrants, they don't buy into this nonsense because one, they know what hardship is. Two, they had to climb and claw up the ladder. These are kids, they're all privileged kids. They're spewing nonsense on Twitter on a computer they never bought themselves.
Right.
Parents payrolling them ever. That's the sad reality. But also, the third point I want to make, education. These people get it. They're doing this right now in our public schools. People, they're doing it in poor districts as well as rich districts, from Hawaii to California to New Jersey. We just talked to someone at the Augustine Institute today, Dr. Ben Atkins. We were telling him
Mhm.
about this. We were talking about revitalizing Catholic education.
Ben Akers.
I'm sorry?
Ben
Akers.
Akers.
I'm sorry. Ultimately, they get it. Do we? Now, listen, we're Catholic. Okay. We send our kids to private school. If we can afford it, we have to make it more affordable. People of goodwill. How about we have charter schools? How about parents take control of the education? You know what's best for your kids. Why are you permitting people to basically form and indoctrinate your children? And they are.
Right.
And here's another thing. Your kids, say you have some brains in your head, and you send them to some of these schools. We talked to John Bergsma about this. He's a professor at Steubenville University. And these kids are basically pumped into their brains. He called them their soft minds. That's what
Right.
Yuri said. These ideas, they abandon their faith, they abandon their family, and even if they make money, who cares? They
Right.
lead a life that amounts to nothing in the
But
end.
that, Joe, and that's where it comes back to, and fast forward from Yuri's comments in the 80s till now, that's what the oligarchs want. They want a certain type of citizen, Joe. Remember we played the clip a couple of weeks ago from Giorgia Maloney, okay?
Yep.
Railing against the New World Order. She said it right. What is a person without roots? T.S. Eliot said it. Where are the roots that clutch? What branches grow from this thorny rubbish? That's what the left wants. Joe, they want rocks. You don't have roots with rocks. If you have roots, you have an identity. You can now, unlike them, who want you to define yourself as an identity that is detached from reality. We identify ourselves as something that is attached to reality. We are made in the image and likeness of God. Okay? We are men. Our wives are women. Our children are boys. Our children are girls. Okay? There's very clear ways we identify ourselves that are attached to reality. The leftist Joe. Remember the movie? I told you this before. Remember in 1984, the movie? No, it's in the book too. Okay. Unfortunately, I wasn't the greatest reader in my life. I read 1984 a long time ago, but I'm a real big fan of the movie. Okay. Where Richard Burton, and you know me, Joe, I'm a big fan of great acting. And Richard Burton was one of the greatest actors of all time. And he's talking to John Hurt, who is another one of the greatest actors of all time. And he holds up his hand, Richard Burton, with that stern, crusty look on crusty face, everything. He says, "How many fingers, Winston?" And Winston says to him at one point, after having inflicted so much pain, okay, he says, "I want to see 5, but I only see 4. And my point, Joe, and I'm going to hand it over to you, they want us to believe things that are not true. O'Brien, which is Richard Burton's character, holds up 4 fingers and says, "What do you see?" He wants them to say 5, but he only has 4 up. And that's what they want us to do. And that is what we fight against. That's what John Horvat was talking about. That's what we talk about here at the front line with Joe and Joe. No, I don't see 5 fingers. I see 4. I don't see a boy. I see a girl. Or I don't see a girl. I see a boy. If you do that, Joe, eventually they're going to put you in jail. I got to throw it over to you.
We let them do it. We let them do
You're
it.
right. You're right about that, by the way.
And I'm going to tell you right
do it.
now, like I said, some people, sadly, they don't have a choice. Like I said, I mentioned this today in our interview. Listen, there are poor people. They have to send their kids to public school. Listen, not everyone's like making money. In fact, most people are in that boat, struggling along. Why do you vote for them? Why do you vote for these people? This is not about the kids. It's not about the kids. Every time I hear that, the teachers' unions, when I hear that, I want to vomit. And I am pro-union. I am absolutely pro-union. I am absolutely pro-worker, but I am pro-child. Children come first. Your zip code should not determine your success. Every kid should have an equal shot at it. And that's not the way it goes because of the way our school system is structured. To boot, they are shoving things down your throat that you do not respect, nor do you teach in your home. And you pay taxes and fund it. How do we continue along this road? It's sad. It's sad. It is the greatest example of systematic racism in America. Most of the kids that are caught in these traps in inner cities, St. Louis, Camden, Newark, Memphis, inner city LA, Patterson, are black. And they are trapped. 2, 3 out of 10 kids graduate those high schools. Most of them go to prison. Girls
Do you think
pregnant
they
by
learn
14.
do you think they learn, Joe? Do you think that they learn? I was always taught, even when I was a kid, and let me tell you something, I'm going to say this right now, full disclosure at the front line with Joe and Joe. I was a rebellious kid. Okay. My father told me to read. I wouldn't read. I wanted to go out and play football and baseball and stickball and wiffle ball and all that kind of stuff and hang out on a street corner. But I got what was at least trying to be told to me. There were certain standards and rules and things that you had to do. That's all gone, Joe Rossinello. That's all gone. Now it's just do whatever you want. Just do whatever you want and don't worry about it. And that's exactly what they're teaching in the public schools. Even our parents were not brain surgeons. Your father, my father, your father was a barber. My father was a teamster. Okay. But they knew back in the day, Joe, in the 70s, when you and I went to public grammar school, okay, those schools were still good. Those teachers were good. They taught you, here's my point, my larger point, Joe. They taught you how to think, not what to think. And even someone like me who rebelled against all of it, okay, I came out of it knowing how to think, okay? And that's what the left hates. That's what they hate. They don't want those black kids in the inner city. Joe and I'm going to say this, Joe, and I know I'm digressing and I'm kind of maybe grandstanding a little bit for a second, okay? But I want everybody out there to know here at the front line with Joe and Joe, because I'm going to say it for the 50th time, the 100th time, the 1,000th time. If you want to see systematic racism in America, you look at 2 issues, big abortion and big education. Blatantly racist, blatantly not anti-people of color, anti-black, okay? We had a conversation today with an educator, and we pointed out, okay, that they keep these kids in chains, and they're all black, Joe, in Newark, Memphis, and all the cities you mentioned, because they don't want them to learn how to think. And that's where we have to continue to fight.
There's no question about it. There's no question about it. And Yuri gets it, and we don't. It comes right down to it. He gets it. And he's telling us what they did, and we watched it happen. Everything he said is going on. Every institution in America, banking, advertising, publishing, entertainment, sports, are run by the people he mentioned. It is the uniparty, the establishment, and they're not interested in you.
No.
Period. End of story.
Joe, this is Gramsci's dream. Gramsci never imagined it would be this wildly successful. But again, why is it successful? Okay. And for those of you out there joining us in the front line with Joe and Joe, we've mentioned Antonio Gramsci a million times in this show. Cultural hegemony, long march through the institutions. Rudi Deutsch in Germany, Gramsci in the 1920s. Joe, this has been wildly successful. You mentioned sports. I don't even think Gramsci even thought that far about sports. He was thinking media, church, definitely the church, education. Okay. This whole thing has infiltrated every part of our society. You have a boy, okay, who swims in the girls' swim meets, okay, who the media calls a girl. He's a boy, Thompson, okay? Well, for the sake of our audience, we'll call him Leah Thompson. He got crushed competing against boys. The media says he's a girl, and I guess he's a girl, okay? The media says he's a girl, and I guess he's a girl. And we sit there and we do nothing. Now, okay, you want to go to the bizarro world, Joe Resinello?
I live in the bizarro world.
We do. You know why? Because we live in the... Now, I know people don't like when we talk like this, but we're going to say it anyway. We live in the United States of America in 2023, okay? If you think you're not living in the bizarro world because you live in the suburbs or whatever the case might be, you think this crap is not affecting you, then you are way off base. Remember something, the left just hasn't gotten to you yet, but they are going to. We're going to play a clip. Joe, this scares me because when I saw this image on this clip, and I'm going to leave it for the audience, okay? I'm thinking, oh, it's a woman, okay, with a woman's voice. She's Asian, whatever. John, play the clip and let's talk about it. Let me throw it over to you by saying this, okay? And I could go on, but I don't want to because I think I've gone on. I've taken enough time from you, Joe Resinello. This guy, because that's who this is. This is a guy, okay, who thinks he's a woman, or is at least pretending to be a woman. That is the ugliness of humanity. You see, he talks about social inclusion, okay? Do you include me? I'm a Roman Catholic man. Am I included in your society? Is Joe Resinello? Are his children, his wife? Is my son and my wife, are we included in your inclusive society? We have different views than you. I want to know. Does anybody challenge him and say, well, what views are excluded? Because Joe, listen, he's not there singing Kumbaya with a bunch of Catholics, okay? Because he hates faithful Catholics, that guy who's pretending that he's a woman. And by the way, I'm going to throw this out there too. When the revolution comes, and if they're successful, you see that guy with that dress on? He's the first one with the machine gun in his hand. They're shooting everybody who they disagree with. Joe, I'm throwing it over to you.
Couple things. I remember when Miss Universe, when I was in high school, was like someone from like Venezuela won, and she was like
and she was a hot chick.
And she was
Joe,
beautiful.
she was a hot chick. Is
Beautiful.
what she was.
We've come a long way since the 80s. Now, couple things. That is in New Orleans. That's where the competition was. The people who are cheering for this man, this is in America, in a major city in America. That is disturbing.
Oh, yeah.
That is a mainstream contest. This isn't some contest that's held in the back of like a bar in the West Village. This is mainstream.
That's right.
And this is streaming right into your house. And to be honest with you, I have nothing but sorrow and pity for that man. Because to be honest with you, transgender people, their life expectancy is not even that of 40 years old.
But they blame you for that, Joe.
But that is absolutely incorrect. And go to Johns Hopkins University and talk about it. Talk about the science. The expectation is never met by the surgery. And that's why the suicide rate is what it is. It's never met. It is a sad reality, and we are encouraging this in our public schools. We're trying to mainstream this to our children. That is nothing short of sad, and it is real, and it is on every street from Hawaii to Maine. coming into your house. I watch TV with my kids on the weekend. We'll watch something, say, on like CNN, not CNN, like
Oh, yeah, I
Turner
was gonna say,
Network.
not CNN.
No, like a movie, like Ted Turner's Network or FX or whatever. Dude, the commercials that are coming through. We'll be watching, like, I don't know, like Lord of the Rings, or watching
Right.
like Star Wars or something. A commercial will come through. My son will be like, two boys are kissing. That's happened
Right.
more times in a
I'm so
commercial.
glad you're bringing this up. I'm watching. Listen. If they brought that, they won't broadcast the Passion of the Christ on those stations. But if they did with the commercials, you have to deal with like the National Ad Council with two guys kissing each other with a little, like two black guys kissing each other with the little black kid who they adopted, saying, "My family's the same as yours, dude." And this is, Joe, where you and I draw the line. Sorry, dude. Your family's not the same as mine. And now I want to make it personal for a second, okay? I have a wife who's a female, by the way, okay? She's not transgender, okay? And my wife happens to be Joe's wife's sister. I have a foster child, a foster son. We have a family. We're a man, a woman, and a child, okay? You are not the same as our family if you're two men and a child. You are not the same as our family if you're two women and a child. You are not. Children, and I know a lot of people don't like, Joe, when we quote the church, okay? But however, we're going to, okay? Children have a right to a mother and a father, not two daddies, not two mommies.
Well, let
A
me break
mother-
that down, because people can misunderstand that. The
Go
reason
ahead, Joe. Go
why
ahead.
they use the flag equal, it's not equal, because a man cannot be a mother and a woman cannot be a father. I have 5 children. There are different roles. A man has a role and a woman has a role. By saying it's equal, you're basically saying the ideal, which is a man and a woman, is basically interchangeable with 2 women and 2 men, and that's not accurate,
That's not
because
accurate.
a man cannot be a mother, and a father and a woman cannot be a father.
Right.
And each child needs those dynamics to become healthy. And that is reality. Now, I'm not saying, listen, 2 guys, listen, ultimately, they have to be respected. We can't be nasty. We can't discriminate against them, and we shouldn't. But you're not doing the child justice. And there was a reason why judges wouldn't give children to same-sex couples. Not because they're bad people, is because a child needs a mother and a father who is a man and a woman, and the relationships are not equal. They'll never be equal. And
Right.
by saying they're equal, you are basically hurting the original cell of each society, which is the family. And in
Well-
turn, you're weakening it.
Joe, I want you to comment
that's
on that
why-
further, please. Joe, take it a few minutes more at the front line with Joe and Joe. And remember, follow Joe and I wherever you see us on social media. The front line with Joe and Joe on YouTube, @with Joe and Joe, @with Joe and Joe on Twitter, and also on the crusadechannel.com. We always recommend it. Joe, talk about that a little bit more. All right, expand on that. It's like,
No,
where
because
have
people
we
think you're
lost this?
a
Why do we
hater.
lose this debate, Joe?
We're not haters. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with what a child needs. There's certain things that are built into your heart, irregardless of what religion you are. You're a person of goodwill. You cannot do certain things. Like, I can't be a mother. And that goes for, to be honest with you, couples that get divorced, that say, women that say, I don't need a man to raise my kid. Oh, yes,
you do. Yes, you do.
Yes, you do. You do.
Joe, how
And
many people you grew up with, okay, where us included, okay? People, men, boys, have attachments to their mom. They have different attachments to their father. Girls, daughters, have an attachment to their mom and have a different attachment to their father. Okay,
That's normal and
It's-
healthy.
it's exactly healthy. Okay, because the mother teaches something and the father teaches something. When you have two men, okay, no, the child is deprived. When you have two women, the child is deprived. I thought it was all about the children. Everything is about the children. Everything we're taught is about the children. Well, if you're really concerned about the children and you want to look at sociology, not religion, okay, sociology and anthropology, okay, what you realize is that no, the most healthy people, men or women, are raised by men and women. And they want to deny that. And it's like, at one point, do we just say, I'm sorry, we're not going to accept that in our society? And they'll say, as you mentioned earlier, that makes us haters. We're haters.
You know, to harken back what Yuri talked about, because the people that run everything and in polite society have brainwashed society through the media, they've altered reality. And what I just spoke about, again, I come from a simple people. I'm 2 generations away from farmers in southern Italy. 100 years ago, my grandfather was working in a factory in Newark. My father ran a barbershop, one-man barbershop. I had relatives, simple, uneducated men that lived dignified, good lives, raised families, worked hard. They got it. You don't need an education in the media and to be basically indoctrinated into this woke idea to basically live a good life. And many people have and do. But sadly, Joe, if you say these things, which are frankly just straight up and down common sense, it's common sense. And here's another thing, it bears good fruit.
Yeah.
What I just said, listen, there's no mathematical formula to raising a good child, but I will tell you this statistically. If you have a man and a woman who love each other and are faithful to each other and have a stable home, it doesn't even have to be a wealthy home, a stable home, loving and safe, the likelihood that you have a healthy and productive child that succeeds in life, maybe doesn't make tons of money, but has a good life, is exponentially higher
Right.
than any other formula that you could construct.
Well, one of the things that our kids, when we raise them the way we're saying, is that this bizarro world alien from another planet who's running Miss Universe, okay, our kids will say to you, your son would say to you, my son would say to me, Papa, that's a boy. That's a man. What is it? What are they talking about? Like that's the scary part about it. And by the way, Joe, make no mistake. And I think I've looked into this. I'm not obviously, Joe, taking away from you, but I've looked into this a little bit more than you have. I'm a little less merciful than you are. Guys like that are dangerous. They are dangerous. You see the way he was pointing at the crowd like this? You're going, he, pardon me for saying he is saying, you will accept all of this. That's a major problem because, and this goes back to the politics, the culture, how much, Joe, look, you and I, we're trying to do what we think that most people should do, which is stand up against this nonsense. To say, dude, listen, I have eyes, I have ears, okay, I have a mouth, I can speak, okay, and when I see something that's BS, I'm calling it out as BS, okay, and I'm calling that guy a guy, and I don't care what you say, okay, and then, but not enough people are not stepping up to the plate. We don't have a lot of time at the front line with Joe and Joe, so. We're going to pivot real quick, and you guys can continue this conversation in the chat room. Joe Biden is a liar. A liar. John, play the clip.
I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I, in my own city, worked there, one of the only white employee, as the only white lifeguard in this 13 or 14 lifeguards, to find out that many of these guys lived in that city their whole life, a small city, and never knew a white man. It was a revelation to me.
Yeah, well, everything is a revelation to Joe Biden, okay? Now, we didn't have the follow-up clip where recently he said, I was an activist. So he's a liar, okay, is what he is. But here's my thing. He's trying to tug it. Joe, we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to throw it over to you. They tug at our heartstrings, these Democrats, okay? They make it seem like we're the haters. And I'm going to harken back to what I said a half hour ago. You support the two biggest racist initiatives in America, big education and big abortion. One enslaves black parents and their children to public schools, and the other one encourages the murder of little black babies in the womb. Joe, I'm not listening to you, Mr. Biden. I am not. You have defaulted on that. You can't tell me that somehow you care about black people, because you don't. Joe, I'm going to shut up and hand it over to you. We got about a minute.
It's MLK Day. A great man. A man who gave up his life and fought for people who had no voice. Joe Biden this weekend went into the Baptist church that MLK was famous for and said he was an activist. He said he went to Catholic Mass at 7:30 and then he went to the black church. Do you actually believe that? And yet he gets away with it. This is where we're at. It is sad. By the way, that lie about him being an activist was debunked in the past, and he just did it again.
He
and
just
no
keeps
one
doing it over and over again.
And no one cares. And no one cares. If you think that America is somehow going to get out of this funk by supporting people like that, and listen, the Republicans aren't too much better. And that's why you should read John Horvat's book, Return to Order. We need hero leadership.
That's right.
Hero leadership is a chapter in that book. We're never going to get out. We need people with character. We don't have it. We need people with a foundation, and we don't have it. We need people that come from stable homes and good families with one man and one woman who are faithful to each other from death, from marriage till death. And that's how we build a strong nation. Until then, you get lies and you'll get liars. And Joe Biden is a liar.
He is. And he always has been, from the time he tried to convince people that I graduated in the top 10% of my law school class. Joe, you're not going to hear it from the media. You're going to hear it from us. There's a lot of voices out there. A lot of voices that point out the lies. The Frontline with Joe and Joe. We do it in our own small way, but we ask you to support us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on YouTube and at with Joe and Joe on Twitter. Please follow us there. TheCrusadeChannel.com, Mike Church's channel. Okay, get on there, subscribe. All right, great lineup, Mike Church, and all the people out there, Joe, that are shedding the light of truth. And you want to know what? Our job is to just do what God wants us to do, which is dispel the lies and speak the truth and let him do it what he wants. And eventually he's going to win. And that's the bottom line. Joe, we got to go. Thank you all out there for joining us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere.